Hello, Mr. Wathi here, and in today's lab we'll be looking at programming in Arduino to control a servo with an analog input, specifically potentiometer. But this again can translate to things like an analog joystick. Analog joystick just has two directions, and I think I showed this example here in the last video, but I'll show you again. This is controlled with an analog joystick, teabagging at its best. So I'll also provide a video of what this might look like for an analog joystick as well. But let's just focus on potentiometer and go from there. Translates really easily. So first off, you can look at the circuit right here. To find the servo, you just type in servo, and there's two different ones. One thing you need to make note of is what the different pins do. So we have signal, power, ground. Signal goes to one of the PWM pins. That's the ones with the squiggly line. Those are the only pins that you can use with the servo. Next, we have our potentiometer. And you have terminal 1 going to power, terminal 2 going to ground, and the middle terminal, the wiper, that goes to one of your analog pins, and I put it in A0. Let's move on to the code with a Blockly Arduino. The link can be found in the description below. So first off, I always like to start with that setup and loop forever, which is under the Arduino menu. That's because it matches the default code. And you go down here to the servo motor tab, and if you don't have that, you need to go to configure blocks and make sure that servo motor right here is checked off. First off, we need to attach the servo motor. So under math, we can grab a number, pop that in there, and I think I'm plugged in 9. Let's double check. Yes, I'm plugged into 9. Next, let's what do we want to do? Well, we need to use one of these rotate servo motor blocks. But how do we control the angle with that input? Well, we need to grab the input, the read value and analog pin input, A0. But how do we convert an analog pin value, which goes from 0 to 1023, to an angle, which goes from 0 to 180? How do we do that? Well, I could do, crazy math formula, but guess what? Luckily, with programming with Arduino, they have a function that does it for us. Thank goodness. And you can find that under this Arduino tab and converting. And so there's something called it remaps value. So we grab this right here, and we notice it needs to be plugged into something. And I have a lot of blocks here. Let's make a variable. And I want to make a variable called angle. And I want to set the angle to this remapped value. Okay. So what value do you want to remap? Well, I want to remap the analog value, which, sometimes I like to create a variable for that too. Analog value, or you can call it joystick value, potentiometer value, whatever your heart desires. We're going to set that analog value to the value at A0. So it's going to read what's going on at the pin when it comes to this block and look at A0 and be like, hey, what's going on here? What's the value? And from there, I'll grab this block, pop it in here. So we want to remap that value that goes from 0 to 1023 to match the angle from 0 to 180. And so we need to grab some numbers here, and I'll pop them in here, and then I'll talk about what we're supposed to type in. So we want to go from the analog value range from 0 to 1023. And we want to go to 0 to 180 degrees. It's that easy. And the last thing we need to make sure we do is to grab that angle variable, pop it in there, and we can copy that code over. Let's try this out. Go to code, Control A, Control V to paste, start the simulation. And we notice that things get a little sketchy here. It doesn't work all that great. And that's because Tinkercad circuits likes to have a little delay. It makes everything work a little smoother. So I'm just going to add a 10 millisecond delay. Copy that over. Control A, Control V. There we go. See, we see things work a lot smoother. So here I'm all the way over on one side, and the servo goes the other way, all the way over. If I go in the middle, that should be around 90 degrees. If I go all the way the other way, it should be at the other end. So we're going from 0 to 90 to 180 and everywhere in between. All right. It's that easy. It's that easy. So let's take a quick look at that map value code. So we see that we did our variable angle equals map function. Our analog value, which is just the variable that reads, we have that equal to analog read A0. And it has the two first numbers, right? Going from 0 to 1023. That's the analog range. And we're going from 0 to 180. So if you wanted to limit that, for example, say if you wanted that to limit that to, I don't know, say 90 degrees to 180. You don't want the full motion. You just want somewhere in between. You can do that. So I can start the simulation. And so now one end will go to 90 degrees. The other end will go to 180. And you notice that it gives you kind of a little bit more control for a little bit of minute movement. So that's the great thing with this map function. It allows you to edit these values, play around with it however you would like. Maybe you don't want the servo to do anything on the lower end. Maybe you want it to start at 400 and only go up to say 800. Not sure why you'd want to do that, but there might be a certain situation. And so you notice that when I'm at the ends here and I move, it doesn't actually do anything until I trigger that value of between 400 and 800. And so the ends don't really matter as much. Okay, so it's that simple. With an analog with an analog joystick, you're doing the same thing here. If you wanted to control two servo motors in both directions of that analog pin, you would just have a second servo, a second map value for the other direction. It's that easy. Now, one thing I would note with the joystick is that its resting position is kind of the middle of the potentiometer. So that's around a value of like 512-ish. And so when you go in one direction, you're going towards 0. And so that would change the servo. So servo default would be 90 degrees, and then you'd go down to 0. And if you go the other way towards from 512 to say 1023, then you'd be going from 90 degrees to 180. So there are ways to play around with that map function to change that around. But that's for another time. I hope this was helpful, and I look forward to seeing you in other videos. Again, I have a lot of other Tinkercad circuit and block layer Arduino tutorials. Check them out. Give me a like, subscribe, leave a comment down below, and let me know if there's any other videos or any other tutorials you'd love to see. And I would love to test those out. Okay, I'll see you later. Take care.